My name is Rebecca Chen, and I'm 32 years old. 3 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life: a thriving veterinary practice in Portland, Oregon, a loving husband named Jake, and what I believed was a close relationship with my younger sister, Vanessa. I never imagined that a routine family dinner would set in motion a chain of events that would expose years of calculated deception, force me into a courtroom, and ultimately require me to prove my own sanity through subpoenaed medical records. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The first crack in my carefully constructed world appeared on a rainy Thursday evening in October. Jake and I had invited Vanessa and her husband Craig over for dinner at our house in the Pearl District. It was supposed to be a celebration. My veterinary clinic had just been featured in Portland Monthly magazine as one of the city's top animal hospitals, and I was finally feeling like all the years of struggle and sacrifice were paying off. Vanessa arrived looking stunning as always, her blonde hair perfectly styled, and her designer outfit making my casual jeans and sweater feel inadequate. She worked as a social media influencer, though her exact income remained mysteriously vague. What wasn't vague was her ability to afford luxury brands and exotic vacations that she documented for her 80,000 Instagram followers. The evening started pleasantly enough. We talked about my recent magazine feature, Jake's promotion to senior architect at his firm, and Vanessa's latest brand partnerships. Craig, who worked in real estate, seemed unusually quiet, but I attributed it to stress from the competitive Portland housing market. It was during dessert that everything shifted. I had just served homemade apple pie when Vanessa's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at it, and her expression changed subtly, a tightening around her eyes that I recognized from childhood as her scheming look. "Oh, that reminds me," she said casually, setting down her fork. "Rebecca, I've been meaning to ask you about something. A few of my followers have been asking about your health situation, and I wasn't sure how much detail you're comfortable sharing publicly." Jake and I exchanged confused glances. "My health situation?" I asked. "What are you talking about, Vanessa?" She tilted her head with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Your bipolar disorder diagnosis. I know you've been struggling with it, and I just want to make sure I'm respecting your privacy when people ask." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt Jake's hand find mine under the table, his grip tight with confusion and alarm. "Vanessa," I said slowly, "I don't have bipolar disorder. I've never been diagnosed with any mental health condition." Her eyebrows raised in what looked like surprise, but there was something calculated about her expression. "Really? But you told me about the medication you're taking, the mood swings, the episodes where you can't get out of bed for days. I thought—" "I never told you any of that because none of it is true. Where would you even get the idea that I have bipolar disorder?" Vanessa looked genuinely confused now. Or at least she was performing confusion very convincingly. "Rebecca, we've talked about this multiple times. Remember when you called me crying last spring, saying you couldn't handle the pressure at the clinic? You mentioned that your doctor had started you on mood stabilizers." I stared at my sister, feeling like I was in some kind of alternate reality. "Vanessa, I called you crying last spring because my head veterinary technician quit unexpectedly and left me short-staffed during our busiest season. I never mentioned any medication or doctor visits for mental health issues." Craig shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly very interested in his pie. Jake's thumb was tracing circles on my hand, a gesture I recognized as his way of staying calm when he was actually furious. "Maybe I misunderstood," Vanessa said, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. But you have to admit, Rebecca, you've been under a lot of stress lately. The way you've been acting, the mood swings. What mood swings? Jake interjected, his voice carefully controlled. Vanessa, I live with Rebecca. I think I would notice if she was having mood swings or episodes significant enough to warrant a bipolar diagnosis. Vanessa turned to Jake with what appeared to be pity. Men don't always notice these things, Jake. Women are better at hiding emotional struggles. Rebecca might not even realize how much her behavior has changed. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a case of crossed wires. Vanessa was actively promoting a narrative about my mental health that was completely fabricated, and she was doing it with such conviction that for a moment I almost questioned my own memory. Vanessa, I said, keeping my voice level with considerable effort, I need you to be very clear about something. Have you told other people that I have bipolar disorder? She hesitated for just a moment too long. I may have mentioned your struggles to a few close friends when I was worried about you. Family support networks are important for people dealing with mental health challenges.
What friends? Jake asked sharply. Who exactly have you been discussing Rebecca's supposed mental health issues with? Another pause. Well, our cousin Michelle asked about Rebecca's absence from family gatherings, and when my friend Lisa's sister was diagnosed with bipolar, I shared some of what I thought I knew about Rebecca's experience to help her understand what to expect. I felt the room spinning slightly. My absence from family gatherings? Vanessa, I attended every family event this year except Aunt Patricia's birthday party, and that was because I had an emergency surgery at the clinic. You seemed very anxious and distracted when you were there, Vanessa insisted, and you left early from several events claiming you were tired or not feeling well. Jake's patience finally snapped. She left early because she's a veterinarian who gets emergency calls, Vanessa. That's how her job works. People don't schedule their pet emergencies around family barbecues. But Vanessa wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed to be doubling down on her version of events. Look, I understand this is difficult to discuss. Mental health stigma is real, and denial is often part of the process. I've been trying to be supportive without being intrusive, but maybe I should have encouraged you to be more open about getting help. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that I realized this wasn't a recent development. This narrative about my mental health had been building for months, maybe longer, and Vanessa had been spreading it to our family and her social circle with apparent conviction. Vanessa, I said, standing up from the table, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I do not have bipolar disorder. I have never been diagnosed with any mental health condition. I am not taking any mood stabilizers or psychiatric medications. Whatever you think you remember about conversations we've had, you're either mistaken or you're deliberately lying. She stood as well, her expression shifting to something that looked like it hurt. Rebecca, you're getting very upset right now. This kind of explosive reaction is exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe we should continue this conversation when you're feeling more stable. The irony was breathtaking. She was using my legitimate anger at her false claims as evidence of the very condition she was falsely attributing to me. It was a perfect circular trap. Any denial or upset on my part could be interpreted as symptoms of the disorder she was claiming I had. Jake had also risen from his seat, and I could see he was struggling to process what he was witnessing. Vanessa, I think you and Craig should leave. This conversation is clearly not productive, and Rebecca has made her position very clear. Craig, who had remained silent throughout this entire exchange, finally spoke up. Yeah, we should probably go. This is getting pretty intense. As they gathered their coats and prepared to leave, Vanessa turned back to me with what appeared to be genuine concern. Rebecca, I love you, and I'm worried about you.
If you're not ready to acknowledge what's happening, I understand. But please know that when you are ready to get help, I'll be here to support you. After they left, Jake and I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. What the hell just happened? How long has she been telling people you have bipolar disorder? I have no idea, I admitted. But Jake, the way she described those conversations, the specific details about medication and doctor's visits, it wasn't like she was confused or mistaken. It felt deliberate. He nodded grimly. It felt like she's been building this story for a while. The question is, why? That night, lying in bed, unable to sleep, I began to piece together recent interactions with family and friends looking for signs that Vanessa's narrative had been spreading. Cousin Michelle's overly gentle tone during our last phone call, my mother's seemingly random suggestion that I take some time for self-care, Jake's sister's unprompted comment about how important it was to prioritize mental health. How many people in my life had been tiptoeing around me, believing I was struggling with a serious mental health condition that I didn't actually have? How long had Vanessa been carefully poisoning my relationships with manufactured concern and fabricated medical information? And most disturbing of all, what was her end game? What did she hope to gain by convincing our family and social circle that I was mentally unstable? As I finally drifted off to sleep that night, I had no idea that Vanessa's lies were about to escalate far beyond family gossip, and that I would soon find myself in a legal battle that would require me to prove my own sanity through court-ordered medical examinations and subpoenaed psychiatric records. The foundation of everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my sister had cracked that evening, but the real earthquake was still coming. Growing up in a middle-class family in Eugene, Oregon, Vanessa and I were always different in fundamental ways that our parents, David and Caroline Chen, seemed determined to ignore. Our father was a soft-spoken accountant who preferred harmony over confrontation, while our mother worked as an elementary school teacher and believed that all sibling conflicts could be resolved with forced apologies and shared activities.
Vanessa was born when I was 4 years old, and from the moment she could walk and talk, she possessed an almost supernatural ability to charm adults while making my life miserable when they weren't watching. She would break my toys and then comfort me when I cried, positioning herself as both the problem and the solution. When she was old enough to form complete sentences, she began crafting elaborate stories about my supposed misdeeds, stories that were always plausible enough to get me in trouble, but impossible to definitively disprove. A lot of love and effort went into bringing the story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The pattern was established early. Vanessa would claim I had hit her, stolen something of hers, or said something mean when no adults were present. When I protested my innocence, she would produce tears on command and express hurt that I was lying about it. Our parents, faced with one child who was crying and another who was protesting, usually chose the path of least resistance by assuming both of us were partially at fault and punishing us equally. By the time I reached middle school, I had learned to document everything. I kept a diary of our interactions, saved notes and drawings she made, and tried to have witnesses present whenever possible. But Vanessa adapted too, becoming more sophisticated in her manipulations. She learned to plant seeds of doubt rather than making direct accusations, to express concern rather than anger, and to position herself as the caring sister worried about my increasingly troubling behavior. High school was when the real divergence began. I threw myself into academics and extracurricular activities, finding refuge in the concrete world of science and mathematics where facts mattered more than narratives. I excelled in biology and chemistry, spent summers volunteering at the local animal shelter, and graduated as valedictorian with a full scholarship to Oregon State University. Vanessa, meanwhile, discovered that her talent for manipulation could be channeled into social media and influencer culture. She was an early adopter of Instagram and YouTube, intuitively understanding how to craft a personal brand that attracted followers and eventually paid partnerships. Her content focused on lifestyle and wellness, presenting herself as an aspirational figure who had overcome various challenges through positive thinking and self-care. What our parents saw was two successful daughters pursuing different but equally valid paths. What I saw was Vanessa monetizing the same skills she had used to torment me throughout childhood, the ability to create compelling narratives, to present herself as both vulnerable and triumphant, and to make others feel like they needed her guidance or approval. During my undergraduate years at Oregon State studying pre-veterinary medicine, Vanessa and I maintained a superficially cordial relationship. She would visit campus occasionally, always with her camera ready to document our sister bonding time for her social media accounts. These visits invariably left me feeling drained and vaguely manipulated, though I couldn't articulate exactly why. It was during one of these visits, my junior year, that I first noticed Vanessa's talent for rewriting recent history. She posted a series of Instagram stories about our weekend together, describing conversations we had never had and attributing quotes to me that I had never said. When I confronted her about it, she laughed it off as creative storytelling and pointed out that her followers didn't know me personally, so what was the harm? The harm, I realized later, was that Vanessa was practicing. She was learning how to create alternative versions of reality that served her purposes, testing the boundaries of what she could get away with, and refining her ability to gaslight anyone who questioned her narratives. Veterinary school at Oregon State was demanding and all-consuming, which suited me perfectly. I found purpose in the precise science of animal medicine and the immediate, tangible results of surgical procedures. While Vanessa's social media following grew and her brand partnerships became more lucrative, I was spending 18-hour days studying anatomy, pharmacology, and surgical techniques. Our parents were proud of both of us, though in different ways. They framed Vanessa's social media success as entrepreneurial and modern, while my academic achievements fit their more traditional understanding of professional success. At family gatherings, Vanessa would regale everyone with stories of her latest travel adventures and brand collaborations, while I would quietly answer questions about my studies and internships. It was during my final year of veterinary school that I met Jake at a coffee shop near campus. He was working on his master's degree in architecture at the University of Oregon and had driven up to Eugene to visit a friend. Our first conversation lasted 4 hours, covering everything from sustainable building design to animal welfare ethics. He was thoughtful, genuinely curious about my work, and refreshingly direct in his communication style. Jake's background was different from mine. He came from a small family in Bend, Oregon, where his parents owned a hardware store and believed in saying exactly what they meant. He found my family dynamics puzzling, particularly my relationship with Vanessa, though he was too polite to say so directly at first. After we had been dating for about 6 months, Jake attended his first Chen family gathering, our cousin Michelle's graduation party. I watched him observe the family dynamics with fresh eyes, particularly the way Vanessa commanded attention and how our parents seemed to unconsciously adjust their behavior around her moods. Later that evening, as we drove back to Eugene, Jake asked carefully, "Is it just me, or does Vanessa seem to really enjoy being the center of attention?" I laughed, relieved that someone else had noticed. She's always been like that. Our parents think it's just her personality, outgoing and social. It's more than that, though, Jake said thoughtfully. It's like she's performing all the time, even with family. And the way she talks about your childhood, some of those stories don't match what you've told me. He was right, of course. Vanessa had spent the evening regaling the family with tales of our childhood adventures, casting herself as the brave little sister who had always looked out for her more timid older sibling. According to her version of events, I had been anxious and fearful as a child, requiring her protection and encouragement to try new things or make friends. This narrative was so different from my own memories and from the documented reality of my academic and social success that I began to understand how Vanessa's revisionist history worked. She didn't contradict verifiable facts, she reframed emotional truths and motivations in ways that served her preferred narrative. After graduation from veterinary school, I completed a surgical residency in Portland and eventually opened my own practice, specializing in emergency and critical care. The work was demanding but rewarding, and Portland's progressive, animal-loving culture meant that business was steady from the beginning. Vanessa, meanwhile, had moved to Portland as well, claiming she wanted to be closer to family, but really attracted by the city's vibrant social media scene and numerous opportunities for content creation. She rented a trendy apartment in the Alberta Arts District and continued to grow her following by positioning herself as a lifestyle guru with insights into wellness, relationships, and personal growth. Our parents were thrilled to have both daughters in the same city again, and they began organizing regular family dinners and activities. These gatherings followed a predictable pattern. Vanessa would arrive with stories of her latest adventures and professional successes. I would share updates about my practice and Jake's architecture projects, and our parents would bask in the glow of having two accomplished daughters. But underneath the surface harmony, I began to notice subtle changes in how family members interacted with me. There were more frequent comments about stress and self-care, gentle suggestions that I should consider taking vacations or reducing my workload, and what seemed like increased scrutiny of my mood and behavior during family gatherings. At the time, I attributed these changes to the natural concern that comes with watching someone work in a high-stress profession. Emergency veterinary medicine meant irregular hours, life and death decisions, and the emotional toll of dealing with pet owners in crisis. It made sense that my family would worry about burnout and encourage me to prioritize my well-being. What I didn't realize was that Vanessa had been systematically laying the groundwork for her mental health narrative for months, maybe even years. She had been dropping subtle comments about my struggles and mood changes, expressing carefully crafted concern about my tendency to isolate and my difficulty managing stress. Looking back, I can see how she had weaponized everyone's genuine care for me, transforming their natural worry about my demanding career into confirmation of her fabricated concerns about my mental stability. She had taken the very success and dedication that defined my professional identity and reframed them as symptoms of an underlying psychological disorder.
The dinner party confrontation had been the moment when Vanessa's carefully constructed narrative finally came into direct conflict with reality. But as I would soon discover, having the truth on my side was not nearly enough to counteract years of strategic deception and the power of a story that people were already predisposed to believe. The weeks following our confrontational dinner party revealed the true scope of Vanessa's campaign against my reputation. What had initially seemed like isolated incidents began forming a disturbing pattern as Jake and I started paying closer attention to family interactions and social dynamics. The first major red flag came during my mother's 58th birthday celebration at a restaurant in downtown Portland. The entire extended family was there. My parents, Vanessa and Craig, our cousin Michelle with her new boyfriend, Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert, and several family friends who had known us since childhood. Throughout the evening, I noticed people speaking to me with an unusual gentleness, as if I were fragile or recovering from something serious. My Aunt Patricia asked repeatedly if I was feeling all right and suggested I might want to take things easy with work. Our family friend, Mrs. Henderson, who had taught both Vanessa and me in elementary school, pulled me aside to tell me how brave I was for handling everything so well. When I asked her what she meant, Mrs. Henderson looked confused and said, "Oh, I just meant everything you've been going through. Vanessa mentioned you've been having a difficult time lately." During the cake-cutting ceremony, Vanessa took charge of organizing photos, positioning herself next to me in every shot, and keeping one hand on my shoulder or arm. To outside observers, it looked like sisterly affection. But her grip was firm, almost possessive, and she kept making subtle comments for the camera about how proud she was of me for staying strong and getting through this challenging period. After the dinner, as our family was saying goodbye in the parking lot, I overheard Vanessa talking quietly to our cousin Michelle near their cars. I caught fragments of the conversation. Episodes are getting more frequent, and refuses to admit she needs help, and worried about her making important decisions right now. When Michelle spotted me approaching, both women immediately shifted to talking about the weather. But the damage was done. I could see in Michelle's expression that she had been receiving regular updates about my supposed mental health crisis,
updates that were painting me as someone in denial about serious psychological problems. The drive home with Jake was tense. He had noticed the strange energy at dinner, too, particularly the way family members seemed to be treating me differently than they had just a few months earlier. "It's like they're all walking on eggshells around you," he observed. "And did you notice how Vanessa kept interrupting whenever you tried to talk about work? She kept steering conversations away from your professional successes." He was right. Every time I mentioned a successful surgery, a new client, or the positive press coverage my clinic had been receiving, Vanessa would quickly redirect the conversation to questions about my stress levels, my sleep schedule, or whether I was taking care of myself. The next warning sign came through my professional network. Dr. Amanda Foster, a colleague who referred clients to my clinic, called to schedule what she described as a wellness check-in coffee date. When we met at a cafe near the veterinary hospital district, Amanda's demeanor was carefully professional, but tinged with concern. "Rebecca, I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you doing okay? I've heard through some mutual connections that you might be dealing with some personal challenges." I felt my stomach drop. What kind of personal challenges? Amanda looked uncomfortable. "I don't want to repeat gossip, but there have been some concerns raised about stress-related health issues. I just wanted you to know that if you need to refer clients elsewhere temporarily while you focus on self-care, I understand completely." The implications were staggering. Vanessa's narrative wasn't just affecting my family relationships, it was beginning to threaten my professional reputation. In the veterinary community, concerns about a colleague's mental stability could quickly translate to questions about their ability to perform surgery and make life-or-death decisions for animals. I pressed Amanda for more details about where she had heard these concerns, but she was reluctant to name sources. However, she did mention that the information had come through someone connected to your family, who was just trying to look out for your best interests. That evening, I called Vanessa directly to confront her about spreading rumors in my professional circles. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Rebecca, how are you feeling today?" The phrasing immediately put me on edge. Not "how are you," but "how are you feeling?" As if my emotional state was a daily concern that required monitoring. "Vanessa, I need to ask you something directly. Have you been talking to people in my professional network about my health?" There was a pause, and when she responded, her tone had shifted to one of hurt confusion. "Rebecca, I'm worried about you. You're starting to sound paranoid. I care about you, and yes, when people ask about you, I express concern because I love you." "What people? Who was asking about me?" "Friends, family, people who care about you." "Rebecca, you're getting very agitated right now. This kind of suspicious thinking is exactly what I'm worried about." The conversation was a masterclass in gaslighting. Every question I asked was reframed as evidence of the very problems she was claiming to be concerned about. My legitimate need for information was characterized as paranoia, and my justified anger was presented as proof of emotional instability. But Vanessa wasn't finished. The following week, she escalated her campaign in a way that caught me completely off guard. She began posting on social media about the hidden struggles that successful people face, sharing articles about high-functioning individuals with mental health challenges, and posting inspirational content about supporting loved ones who are too proud to ask for help. While my name was never mentioned directly, the timing and context made it clear to anyone who knew both of us that she was referring to me. Her posts began attracting comments from family members and mutual friends, expressing support for her as the caring sister who was going through so much watching a loved one struggle. Jake discovered this social media campaign when Michelle tagged him in one of Vanessa's posts with a heart emoji and a comment about family strength. When he showed me the post,
a carousel of images about recognizing signs of bipolar disorder in high-achieving individuals, I felt physically sick. "She's building a public narrative," Jake said grimly. "She's creating a paper trail that makes her look like the concerned sister, and you look like someone in denial about serious mental health issues." The most disturbing aspect was how sophisticated the campaign was. Vanessa wasn't making direct claims about my diagnosis. She was sharing general information about mental health awareness, while strategically timing these posts to coincide with family events or professional milestones in my life. To her followers, it looked like educational content. To people who knew our family, it was clearly about me. The tipping point came during a family barbecue at our parents' house in early December. Vanessa arrived with printed copies of articles about supporting family members with bipolar disorder, which she casually left on the kitchen counter where everyone would see them. When our father asked about the articles, she explained that she had been doing research and trying to educate herself about how to be a better support system. Throughout the afternoon, she continued her performance of the concerned sister. She followed me around the house, asking repeatedly if I needed anything, suggesting I might want to sit down and rest, and making pointed comments about how important it was for me to listen to my body and not push myself too hard.
The breaking point came when I was in the kitchen helping my mother prepare dinner. Vanessa entered with her phone already recording, apparently planning to capture some candid family moments for her social media. She immediately began narrating the scene, describing how wonderful it was to see me having a good day and being able to participate in family activities. The implication was clear. There were apparently many days when I wasn't able to participate, many days when I wasn't having good days. She was creating a video record that suggested my presence at normal family activities was noteworthy rather than routine. When I asked her to stop recording, she looked hurt and said, "I just want to capture these special moments when you're feeling like yourself." My mother, who had been listening to this exchange, finally spoke up. "Vanessa, honey, why wouldn't Rebecca be feeling like herself?" Vanessa's expression shifted to one of uncomfortable realization, as if she had accidentally said too much. "Oh, I just meant, with all the stress she's been under at work, I didn't mean anything specific." But the damage was done. I could see the confusion and concern growing in my mother's expression as she began to process the implications of Vanessa's comments. How many similar conversations had taken place when I wasn't present? How many seeds of doubt had been planted in my parents' minds about my mental state and emotional stability? That night, lying in bed, unable to sleep, I realized that Vanessa's campaign had reached a critical mass. She had successfully created a narrative about my mental health that was spreading through both my personal and professional networks. People who cared about me were now viewing my behavior through the lens of her fabricated concerns, looking for signs of instability and interpreting my normal reactions to stress as symptoms of a serious disorder. What terrified me most was the systematic nature of it all. This wasn't a case of misunderstanding or family drama that had gotten out of hand. This was a calculated campaign designed to undermine my credibility and reputation while positioning Vanessa as the caring sister dealing with a difficult family situation. I had no idea that her next move would involve legal authorities, or that I would soon find myself in a position where I would have to prove my own sanity through court-ordered medical examinations. The crisis that would change everything began on a Tuesday morning in January with what seemed like a routine emergency call at my veterinary clinic. Mrs. Thompson had rushed in with her golden retriever, Bailey, who had been hit by a car while chasing a ball into the street. The dog had sustained multiple injuries, including a fractured leg and internal bleeding that required immediate surgical intervention. I had performed hundreds of similar emergency surgeries throughout my career, and this case, while serious, was well within my expertise. Bailey's surgery took 3 hours and was ultimately successful. The dog would need weeks of recovery, but he would make a full recovery and return to normal activity levels.
What I didn't know was that Mrs. Thompson was a friend of Craig's mother, and that this connection would provide Vanessa with the opportunity she had been waiting for to escalate her campaign against me. 2 days after Bailey's surgery, I received a call from the Oregon Veterinary Medical Board informing me that they had received a formal complaint about my conduct during the emergency procedure. The complaint alleged that I had appeared erratic and unstable during the surgery, that I had made concerning statements about my mental state, and that my behavior had caused distress to both the pet owner and my staff. I was stunned. The surgery had gone perfectly, Mrs. Thompson had been grateful for Bailey's successful treatment, and my staff had worked with their usual professional efficiency. When I asked for specifics about the complaint, the board representative, Dr. Susan Martinez, explained that they were required to investigate all allegations of professional misconduct, particularly those involving concerns about a veterinarian's mental fitness to practice. The complaint specifically mentions concerns about bipolar disorder and questions about whether you're currently receiving appropriate treatment. Dr. Martinez said carefully, "I have to ask, Dr. Chen, are you currently under the care of a mental health professional?"
The question felt like a trap. If I said yes, it would seem to confirm that I had mental health issues requiring professional intervention. If I said no, it could be interpreted as evidence that I was neglecting necessary treatment for a known condition. Dr. Martinez, I don't have bipolar disorder. I've never been diagnosed with any mental health condition that would affect my ability to practice veterinary medicine. There was a pause before she responded. Dr. Chen, the complaint includes statements from multiple sources who have expressed concern about your mental health over the past several months. While I can't share specific details due to confidentiality requirements, I can tell you that this appears to be an ongoing situation rather than an isolated incident. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. Someone had filed a formal complaint with my professional licensing board, using Vanessa's manufactured narrative about my mental health as the foundation for questioning my fitness to practice veterinary medicine. If the board found the complaint credible, I could face suspension of my license, mandatory psychiatric evaluation, or even permanent revocation of my right to practice. I immediately called Jake at his office, barely able to speak coherently as I explained what had happened. He left work immediately and arrived at my clinic within 20 minutes, finding me sitting in my office staring at the wall in shock. "Who filed the complaint?" he asked, pulling a chair next to my desk. "They won't tell me yet, but it mentioned multiple sources with concerns about my mental health. Jake, this has Vanessa written all over it." Jake's expression was grim as he processed the implications. If she's involved, she's not working alone. Filing a complaint with a professional licensing board is serious business. Someone with legal knowledge would have had to help her understand the process and the language to use. That afternoon, I called my longtime physician, Dr. Rachel Kim, who had been my primary care doctor for the past 8 years. I explained the situation and asked her to provide a letter documenting my medical history and current health status. Dr. Kim was shocked by what I was telling her. "Rebecca, in all the years I've been your doctor, you've never shown any signs of mental health issues. Your annual physicals have been consistently normal. You've never requested psychiatric medications, and your psychological screening questionnaires have never indicated any concerns. Would you be willing to put that in writing?" "Absolutely. But Rebecca, if someone is making formal complaints to your licensing board, you need to document everything. This could escalate beyond just a professional complaint." Her words proved prophetic. That evening, as I was closing up the clinic, I received a visit from 2 officers from the Portland Police Bureau's Crisis Intervention Team. Officer Patricia Wells and Officer Mark Rodriguez explained that they had received a report from a concerned family member about my mental state and potential risk of self-harm. "Dr. Chen, we're here to conduct a welfare check," Officer Wells explained. "We've received information suggesting that you may be experiencing a mental health crisis and that you might be a danger to yourself or others." I felt the world spinning around me as I realized the full scope of what was happening.
Someone had not only filed a complaint with my professional board, but had also contacted police claiming I was a danger to myself and others. Officers, I can assure you that I'm not experiencing any kind of mental health crisis. I'm not suicidal, I'm not a danger to anyone, and I have no idea why someone would report otherwise. Officer Rodriguez checked his notes. The report specifically mentions concerns about bipolar disorder, erratic behavior, and statements you've allegedly made about feeling overwhelmed and unable to cope. The reporting party expressed fear that you might harm yourself or make poor decisions that could endanger others. Who made this report? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. I can't share the identity of the reporting party, but I can tell you that it came from someone who claims to be a close family member who has been monitoring your behavior for several months.
The officers spent about 30 minutes at the clinic, observing my behavior, asking questions about my mental state, and evaluating whether I met the criteria for an involuntary psychiatric hold. Fortunately, I was clearly rational, coherent, and not exhibiting any signs of mental distress beyond the understandable upset at being falsely accused. However, Officer Wells explained that they would need to file a report documenting their visit and that this report could be accessed by other agencies investigating concerns about my mental fitness. Dr. Chen, even though we're not taking any action today, I have to advise you that if we receive additional reports about your mental state, the situation could escalate. You might want to consider consulting with a mental health professional who can provide documentation of your psychological stability. After the officers left, I sat alone in my clinic feeling like my entire world was collapsing. In the span of one day, I had been reported to my professional licensing board and had police conduct a welfare check based on concerns about my mental health. Vanessa's campaign had moved beyond family gossip and social media manipulation into official legal and professional channels. When I got home, Jake was waiting with our laptop open to Vanessa's social media accounts. "You need to see this," he said grimly. Vanessa had posted a series of Instagram stories earlier that day about the difficult decision to report concerns about a loved one's mental health to appropriate authorities. While she didn't name me directly, the timing was unmistakable. She described the heartbreak of watching someone you love spiral and the courage required to do the right thing, even when it meant potentially damaging family relationships. The post had generated dozens of supportive comments praising her for being a strong sister and for prioritizing safety over family loyalty. Several comments specifically mentioned how brave she was for reporting her concerns to the proper authorities. "She's not just building a narrative anymore," Jake said. "She's creating a public record of her actions while positioning herself as the hero of the story. And look at this." He scrolled to a post from earlier in the week where Vanessa had shared an article about the warning signs that healthcare professionals should watch for in colleagues who might be struggling with mental health issues. The article specifically mentioned veterinarians as a high-risk profession for suicide and mental health challenges. "She's been researching how to target your profession specifically," Jake continued. "This isn't a random character assassination. She's systematically attacking the foundations of your ability to work and support yourself." As we sat there trying to process the day's events, my phone rang. The caller ID showed our cousin Michelle's number. "Rebecca, I just heard what happened today. Are you okay?" "What exactly did you hear, Michelle?" "Vanessa called me crying, saying that she had to make some really difficult phone calls today because she was worried about my safety. She said the authorities told her it was the right thing to do, but that she feels terrible about having to report her own sister." The manipulation was breathtaking in its sophistication. Vanessa had positioned herself as the reluctant hero, forced to take difficult action to protect me, while simultaneously creating witnesses to her supposed emotional distress over the situation. "Michelle, I need you to understand something very clearly. I am not
having a mental health crisis. I do not have bipolar disorder. Vanessa has been spreading lies about my health for months, and today she escalated those lies to authorities." There was a long pause before Michelle responded. "Rebecca, I'm worried about you. You sound really upset, and this kind of reaction, maybe Vanessa was right to be concerned." At that moment, I realized the true genius of Vanessa's campaign. She had created a situation where any attempt on my part to defend myself or refute her claims would be interpreted as evidence of the very instability she was alleging. My anger was proof of my mood disorders, my detailed rebuttals were signs of paranoia, and my insistence on the truth was evidence of my inability to accept reality. That night, I barely slept as I contemplated the next steps. Vanessa had successfully weaponized both my professional licensing board and law enforcement against me. She had created a public narrative that positioned herself as the caring sister dealing with a mentally unstable sibling, and she had done it all while maintaining plausible deniability about her motives. What I didn't yet realize was that her next move would involve legal action that would force me to prove my sanity through court-ordered psychiatric evaluations and subpoenaed medical records. The crisis point had been reached, but the real battle was just beginning.
The legal battle that would ultimately expose Vanessa's deception began 3 weeks after the police welfare check, when I received a certified letter that would change everything. The letter was from Morrison and Associates, a family law firm in downtown Portland, informing me that my sister, Vanessa Chan Rodriguez, had filed a petition for guardianship over me, citing my alleged mental incapacity and inability to make sound decisions regarding my health, finances, and professional responsibilities. I read the legal document 3 times before the full implications sank in. Vanessa was attempting to have me declared legally incompetent, which would give her control over my medical decisions, financial assets, and potentially my veterinary practice. The petition included affidavits from multiple sources alleging that I had been exhibiting erratic behavior, making concerning statements about my mental state, and refusing necessary psychiatric treatment for a diagnosed bipolar disorder. Jake found me sitting at our kitchen table with the legal papers spread in front of me, tears streaming down my face. "She's trying to take everything," I whispered. "My practice, my independence, my right to make my own decisions. She's actually trying to have me declared incompetent?" Jake read through the petition with growing anger. "This is insane. Half of these allegations are completely fabricated, and the other half are normal stress responses that she's reframing as mental illness symptoms." But what truly shocked us were the names on the supporting affidavits. Craig, Vanessa's husband, had provided a statement claiming he had witnessed me having manic episodes during family gatherings. Mrs. Thompson, Bailey's owner, had somehow been convinced to sign an affidavit stating that I had appeared unstable and concerning during her dog's surgery. Most devastating of all, there was a statement from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a psychiatrist I had never met, claiming that based on collateral information from family members, she believed I was suffering from untreated bipolar disorder and posed a risk to myself and others. "How is this even legal?" I asked Jake. "Dr. Walsh has never examined me, never spoken to me, never reviewed my actual medical records. How can she make clinical statements about my mental health?" Jake was already on his phone searching for lawyers who specialized in guardianship disputes. "We need legal help immediately. This kind of petition can move through the courts quickly, especially if they're claiming you're in imminent danger." The lawyer we found, Patricia Brennan, specialized in defending against fraudulent guardianship petitions, a practice that was apparently more common than I had realized. When we met with her the following day, she immediately recognized the warning signs of what she called a weaponized guardianship. "This is unfortunately not uncommon," Attorney Brennan explained. "Family members with financial or personal motivations sometimes use the guardianship system to gain control over someone's assets or to settle personal grudges. The system is designed to protect vulnerable adults, but it can be manipulated by people who understand how to present compelling evidence of incapacity.
She reviewed Vanessa's petition with a practiced eye, pointing out inconsistencies and red flags. The fact that Dr. Walsh provided a clinical opinion without ever examining you, never spoken to you, never reviewed your actual medical records, is highly problematic and potentially an ethics violation. We'll definitely be challenging her involvement and reporting her to the medical board. But Attorney Brennan also explained the serious reality of what we were facing. Guardianship proceedings have a low burden of proof, and judges tend to err on the side of caution when presented with concerns about someone's mental capacity. Even though these allegations appear to be fabricated, we need to be prepared for the possibility that the court might order a temporary guardianship while the case is being decided. The next phase of the legal battle involves something I had never anticipated: having my own medical records subpoenaed to prove my sanity. Attorney Brennan filed motions requesting access to all of my medical records from the past 10 years, including records from Dr. Kim, my primary care physician, and any specialists I had seen for routine care. We're going to use your own medical history to demonstrate that you've never been diagnosed with or treated for any mental health conditions. Your clean medical record will be our strongest evidence against these fabricated claims. But Vanessa's legal team countered with their own motion, requesting court-ordered psychiatric evaluations by their chosen mental health professionals. They argued that my lack of psychiatric treatment was actually evidence of my denial and refusal to seek help for a serious condition.
The hearing to determine whether I would be subjected to court-ordered evaluations was scheduled for February 15th. As that date approached, I began to understand the full scope of Vanessa's long-term planning. She hadn't just been spreading rumors about my mental health. She had been methodically building a legal case for months, possibly years. 3 days before the hearing, Attorney Brennan received a discovery request that revealed the most shocking aspect of Vanessa's deception. Her legal team had been in contact with Dr. Walsh for over 6 months, feeding her carefully crafted information about my supposed symptoms and behaviors. Dr. Walsh had been building a clinical file on me based entirely on Vanessa's fabricated reports, creating what appeared to be professional documentation of my alleged mental illness. "This is beyond unethical," Attorney Brennan said as we reviewed the discovery materials. "Dr. Walsh has been acting as Vanessa's co-conspirator, creating false medical records to support a fraudulent guardianship petition. This is grounds for both criminal charges and medical board sanctions." But the most devastating revelation came when we discovered that Vanessa had been secretly recording our family interactions for months. She had audio recordings of conversations where she claimed I had made statements about feeling suicidal or unable to cope, conversations I remembered completely differently. When we had the recordings analyzed by a forensic audio expert, we discovered they had been edited to remove context and splice together fragments of different conversations. The February 15th hearing was my first direct confrontation with Vanessa in a formal legal setting. She arrived at the courthouse dressed conservatively and accompanied by Craig and what appeared to be a victim's advocate. Her performance in the hallway before the hearing was Oscar-worthy. She appeared genuinely distressed, speaking in hushed tones with her attorney about her difficult decision to seek guardianship over her beloved sister. When our eyes met across the courthouse corridor, I saw something in her expression that I had never seen before: absolute confidence. She believed she was going to win, that her carefully constructed narrative would convince the judge to grant her control over my life. The hearing itself was surreal. Vanessa's attorney, Thomas Morrison, presented their case with theatrical precision, painting me as a mentally ill veterinarian whose untreated bipolar disorder posed a danger to both animals and humans. He referenced the licensing board complaint, the police welfare check, and the edited audio recordings as evidence of my deteriorating mental state. "Your Honor, Dr. Chen's sister has spent months trying to help her recognize the need for treatment, but Dr. Chen's illness prevents her from understanding the severity of her condition.
Miss Rodriguez seeks guardianship not for personal gain, but out of love and genuine concern for her sister's welfare. When it was Attorney Brennan's turn to respond, she systematically dismantled every piece of evidence in Vanessa's petition. She presented my complete medical records, showing no history of mental health treatment, no psychiatric medications, and consistent documentation of normal psychological functioning during routine medical care. Your Honor, this is not a case of a concerned sister seeking help for a mentally ill sibling. This is a calculated campaign of defamation and fraud designed to destroy Dr. Chen's reputation and steal control of her assets. The petitioner has fabricated evidence, manipulated audio recordings, and conspired with a psychiatrist to create false medical documentation. The turning point came when Attorney Brennan called Dr. Kim to testify about my medical history. Dr. Kim had brought every file from my 8 years as her patient, and her testimony was damning to Vanessa's case. In all my years as Dr. Chen's patient, I have never observed any signs of mental illness, Dr. Kim testified. Her annual psychological screenings have been consistently normal. She has never requested psychiatric medications or referrals, and she has never exhibited any symptoms that would suggest bipolar disorder or any other mental health condition. Under cross-examination, Dr. Kim became even more forceful. I want to be very clear about something, she said, looking directly at the judge. If Dr. Chen had bipolar disorder, especially untreated bipolar disorder, as severe as the petitioner claims, I would have seen clear evidence of it during our regular appointments. The complete absence of any mental health concerns in her medical record is not consistent with the allegations in this petition.
But the most explosive moment came when Attorney Brennan questioned Dr. Walsh about her involvement in the case. Under oath, Dr. Walsh was forced to admit that she had never met me, never conducted any clinical interviews, and had based her professional opinion entirely on information provided by Vanessa. Dr. Walsh, isn't it true that you violated multiple professional ethical standards by providing clinical opinions about someone you've never examined? Attorney Brennan asked. Dr. Walsh's response was barely audible. I believed I was helping to identify someone who needed mental health intervention. And isn't it also true that you've been compensated by the petitioner's family for your professional services in this matter? Yes, I received payment for my consultation and report preparation. Judge Harrison's expression grew increasingly stern as the hearing progressed. By the time closing arguments concluded, it was clear that Vanessa's carefully constructed case was falling apart under legal scrutiny. But what happened next would reveal the true depth of Vanessa's deception and the extent to which she had been willing to go to destroy my life. As we waited for the judge's decision, Attorney Brennan received an urgent phone call that would expose a conspiracy far more extensive than any of us had imagined. The urgent phone call that Attorney Brennan received as we waited for Judge Harrison's decision came from Detective Sarah Martinez of the Portland Police Bureau's Financial Crimes Division. What she revealed would transform our guardianship defense into a criminal investigation that would expose the true scope of Vanessa's deception. Ms. Brennan, we've been investigating a series of fraudulent insurance claims involving veterinary practices in the Portland area. Your client's name has come up in connection with these investigations, but not as a suspect. We believe she may be a victim. The financial crimes investigation had begun 6 months earlier when several pet insurance companies noticed unusual patterns in claims submitted for animals treated at various veterinary clinics around Portland. The claims weren't coming from the veterinarians themselves, but from a third party who claimed to be acting on behalf of pet owners who were supposedly mentally incapacitated to handle their own insurance paperwork. The person filing these claims identified herself as Vanessa Rodriguez, and she claimed to have power of attorney over her mentally ill sister, Dr. Rebecca Chen. She's been collecting insurance payouts for treatments that your client performed, claiming that Dr. Chen was too unstable to handle financial matters related to her own practice.
Attorney Brennan put the call on speaker so Jake and I could hear the devastating details. Vanessa had been systematically filing fraudulent insurance claims using my name and my clinic's treatment records, collecting thousands of dollars in payments that should have gone directly to pet owners or been processed through normal billing procedures. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked, feeling nauseous as the implications became clear. "Conservatively, around $47,000 over the past 8 months, Detective Martinez replied. "But we're still uncovering the full extent of the fraud." Ms. Rodriguez has been very sophisticated in her approach, targeting insurance companies that don't typically communicate with each other and using different variations of the power of attorney story. The financial crimes investigation explained several mysterious incidents that had occurred at my clinic over the past year. Pet owners had occasionally mentioned receiving unexpected insurance payouts for treatments that should have been billed differently, and my office manager had noted discrepancies in our insurance processing that we had attributed to administrative errors by the insurance companies.
But Vanessa's financial crimes went beyond insurance fraud. Detective Martinez explained that they had also discovered evidence of identity theft and credit fraud. Vanessa had been using her fabricated narrative about my mental incapacity to access financial accounts and credit reports, claiming that she needed to monitor my finances due to my alleged inability to manage money during manic episodes. "She's opened 3 credit cards in your name over the past 6 months, Detective Martinez continued. The applications included supporting documentation about your supposed mental illness and her role as your caregiver. The credit card companies approved the applications based on what appeared to be legitimate medical and legal documentation." Jake's hand found mine as we listened to the detective detail how thoroughly Vanessa had infiltrated every aspect of my life. She hadn't just been spreading lies about my mental health, she had been monetizing those lies, using my supposed incapacity as a business model for financial fraud. Attorney Brennan immediately recognized how this criminal investigation would affect our guardianship case. "Attorney Martinez, will you be able to provide testimony about these findings to Judge Harrison today?" "Absolutely. We've been building this case for months, and the guardianship petition actually helps confirm our investigation. The timeline of Ms. Rodriguez's fraudulent activities correlates perfectly with her campaign to establish a legal narrative about her sister's mental incapacity." When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Harrison's demeanor had shifted noticeably. Detective Martinez's testimony about the criminal investigation cast Vanessa's guardianship petition in an entirely new light. What had appeared to be a family dispute about mental health concerns was now clearly revealed as part of a larger criminal enterprise. "Miss Rodriguez," Judge Harrison addressed Vanessa directly, "you are aware that filing false documents in support of a guardianship petition constitutes perjury, and that conspiracy to commit fraud is a felony offense?" Vanessa's composure finally cracked. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw genuine fear in her eyes as she realized that her carefully constructed facade was completely destroyed. Her attorney, Thomas Morrison, looked equally shocked as he began to understand that his client had used him as an unwitting accomplice in a criminal conspiracy. "Your Honor, my client was acting out of genuine concern for her sister's welfare," Morrison stammered, clearly realizing that he needed to distance himself from Vanessa's actions. Judge Harrison's response was swift and decisive. "The guardianship petition is denied in its entirety. Furthermore, I am ordering that all materials submitted in support of this petition be turned over to law enforcement for criminal investigation. Ms. Rodriguez, you are advised that anything you say from this point forward may be used against you in criminal proceedings." But the judge wasn't finished. He also issued immediate sanctions against Dr. Jennifer Walsh for her unethical involvement in the case. "Dr. Walsh, your participation in this fraudulent scheme represents a serious violation of medical ethics and potentially criminal conspiracy. I am referring your conduct to both the Oregon Medical Board and the District Attorney's Office for investigation." As we left the courthouse that afternoon, I felt a complex mixture of relief, anger, and profound sadness. The legal victory had vindicated me completely, but it had also revealed the true extent of my sister's betrayal. This wasn't just family drama or sibling rivalry. It was calculated criminal behavior that had put my career, my finances, and my reputation at serious risk. The aftermath of the court hearing moved quickly. Within 48 hours, Vanessa was arrested on multiple felony charges, including insurance fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Craig, her husband, was also arrested as a co-conspirator after investigators discovered that he had helped forge documents and had received some of the fraudulent insurance payouts. Dr. Walsh lost her medical license pending a full investigation by the medical board, and she ultimately faced criminal charges for her role in the conspiracy. The psychiatrist who had provided false clinical opinions about my mental health became a cautionary tale in medical ethics courses about the dangers of providing professional opinions without proper examination and documentation. The Oregon Veterinary Medical Board not only dropped their investigation of my professional conduct, but issued a formal apology for the way their complaint process had been manipulated. They implemented new procedures to prevent similar fraudulent complaints in the future and used my case as an example in their continuing education programs about recognizing and responding to bad faith allegations against licensed professionals.
My parents' reaction to the criminal charges was perhaps the most difficult aspect of the entire ordeal. Initially, they struggled to accept that Vanessa's behavior had been criminal rather than misguided. Our father, in particular, wanted to believe that Vanessa had genuinely been concerned about my mental health and had simply made poor decisions in how she tried to help. But as more details of the financial fraud emerged, even he couldn't deny the calculated nature of her actions. The discovery that Vanessa had been stealing money using my name and reputation was impossible to rationalize as familial concern. Our mother, who had always prided herself on raising two successful daughters, was devastated by the realization that one of her children had systematically tried to destroy the other. The extended family's reactions split along predictable lines. Some relatives, particularly those who had been most influenced by Vanessa's social media presence, struggled to reconcile the caring sister they thought they knew with the criminal who had been revealed in court. Others, particularly our cousin Michelle, admitted that they had always sensed something manipulative about Vanessa's behavior, but had never imagined the extent of her deception. The professional consequences for my veterinary practice were initially concerning, but ultimately manageable. Several clients who had heard about the legal proceedings needed reassurance about my mental fitness and professional competence. However, the public nature of the criminal charges against Vanessa actually helped clarify that I had been the victim rather than the perpetrator of misconduct. My practice not only survived the scandal, but actually grew stronger as other veterinarians and pet owners rallied to support me. The Portland veterinary community is relatively small, and news of how I had been targeted by fraudulent complaints spread quickly. Many colleagues expressed outrage that the professional complaint process had been weaponized against one of their own. The financial recovery was more complex. While the criminal restitution process would eventually recover some of the stolen money, the credit damage and the costs of legal defense created ongoing challenges. Jake and I had to completely rebuild my credit profile and implement extensive identity protection measures to prevent future fraud. Perhaps most importantly, the entire experience forced me to confront how thoroughly I had been gaslighted and manipulated. Working with a therapist who specialized in family trauma and psychological abuse helped me understand how Vanessa's manipulation had worked and why I had been so vulnerable to her tactics. Dr. Lisa Chen, no relation, my therapist, explained that growing up with a manipulative sibling had conditioned me to doubt my own perceptions and to rationalize obviously problematic behavior. Quote, Vanessa trained you from childhood to accept her version of reality over your own direct experience, she explained. Recovery isn't just about healing from this specific incident. It's about learning to trust your own judgment and recognize manipulation tactics.
The therapy also helped me understand that Vanessa's behavior wasn't just criminal, it was pathological. Normal sibling rivalry doesn't involve elaborate criminal conspiracies designed to destroy someone's career and steal their identity. The systematic nature of her deception suggested personality disorders that went far beyond ordinary family dysfunction. As the criminal cases against Vanessa and Craig moved through the court system, I began the long process of rebuilding not just my finances and reputation, but my entire understanding of family, trust, and personal boundaries. 2 years after Judge Harrison dismissed Vanessa's fraudulent guardianship petition, I found myself standing in the conference room of Morrison and Associates, ironically, the same law firm that had originally represented my sister. Thomas Morrison, the attorney who unknowingly helped Vanessa file her petition, had contacted me through my lawyer to request a meeting that would change everything I thought I knew about the scope of her deception. "Dr. Chen," Morrison began, his voice heavy with what appeared to be genuine remorse, "I need to share some information that came to light during our internal investigation after your sister's arrest. What we discovered goes far beyond what was presented during the criminal proceedings." Morrison explained that after Vanessa's arrest, his firm had conducted a comprehensive review of all cases she'd been involved in, either directly or indirectly. What they found was a network of fraudulent activities spanning nearly 5 years, involving at least 12 other victims across 3 states. Vanessa wasn't just targeting family members. She had developed a sophisticated system for identifying and exploiting successful professionals, particularly women in healthcare and other high-stress careers. She would infiltrate their social circles, build relationships with family members and colleagues, and then systematically destroy their reputations using fabricated mental health narratives.
The revelation was staggering. Vanessa hadn't targeted me because of sibling rivalry or family dynamics. I had been selected as a victim because I fit a specific profile that she had refined through years of criminal activity. My success as a veterinarian, my demanding career, and my relative social isolation due to long work hours had made me an ideal target for her particular brand of fraud. Morrison showed me files documenting Vanessa's other victims: a cardiac surgeon in Seattle whose hospital privileges had been suspended based on fabricated concerns about prescription drug abuse, a physical therapist in San Francisco who had lost her practice after fake reports of patient abuse, a dentist in Sacramento who had been investigated by the state licensing board for allegedly providing substandard care during supposed manic episodes. The pattern was always the same, Morrison explained. Vanessa would position herself as a concerned friend or family member, gradually build a narrative about the victim's mental health struggles, and then escalate to formal complaints with licensing boards, insurance fraud, or attempts to gain financial control through fabricated power of attorney documents. What made Vanessa's operation particularly insidious was her use of legitimate mental health terminology and her ability to manipulate healthcare systems that were designed to protect vulnerable individuals. She had studied the diagnostic criteria for various mental health conditions, learned the language that would trigger concern from professionals, and understood exactly which institutions to contact to maximize damage to her victims' careers and reputations. The Seattle cardiac surgeon, Dr. Maria Gonzalez, had been targeted after Vanessa befriended her during a medical conference. Over the course of 18 months, Vanessa had cultivated relationships with Dr. Gonzalez's colleagues and family members, gradually introducing concerns about her alleged prescription drug abuse and erratic behavior in the operating room. The scary part, Dr. Gonzalez told me during a phone conversation arranged by our attorneys, is that she was so convincing that even I started doubting myself. When multiple people began expressing concern about my behavior, I actually sought psychiatric evaluation to make sure I wasn't missing signs of addiction or mental illness. Dr. Gonzalez's experience highlighted one of the most psychologically damaging aspects of Vanessa's tactics. Her victims often ended up questioning their own mental health and seeking unnecessary medical treatment, creating actual medical records that could then be misrepresented as evidence of the very condition she was fabricating.
The financial scope of Vanessa's crimes was also much larger than prosecutors had initially understood. Beyond the direct insurance fraud and identity theft, she had been operating what essentially amounted to a protection racket, approaching some victims with offers to help them manage their mental health crises in exchange for payment. A dentist in Sacramento, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, sharing the same name as the psychiatrist who had provided false testimony in my case, had paid Vanessa over $25,000 over the course of a year, believing that Vanessa was helping to suppress rumors about her mental stability that could have destroyed her practice. She convinced me that there were people spreading lies about my mental health and that she had connections who could help contain the damage, Dr. Walsh explained during a victim impact meeting organized by federal prosecutors. I didn't realize until much later that she was the source of the rumors she was offering to help me fight. This revelation led to federal charges being filed against Vanessa for operating a criminal enterprise across state lines. The FBI's investigation uncovered evidence of wire fraud, mail fraud, and racketeering charges that carried potential sentences far beyond what she had received for the crimes committed against me specifically. Federal agent Sarah Kim, who led the multi-state investigation, explained that Vanessa's operation represented a new and particularly sophisticated form of identity theft and professional fraud. Traditional identity theft typically focuses on financial accounts or credit cards, but Vanessa Rodriguez developed a system for stealing something more valuable: professional reputation and career credibility. The damage she caused to these victims' lives went far beyond monetary losses. The federal investigation also revealed that Vanessa had been documenting her activities extensively, keeping detailed files on each victim, including psychological profiles, strategic plans for reputation destruction, and financial projections for potential fraud proceeds. When federal agents searched her apartment and storage units, they found what could only be described as a criminal enterprise's administrative headquarters. She had spreadsheets tracking the progress of each victim's reputation destruction, photos of their homes and workplaces, copies of their professional licenses and certifications, and detailed notes about their family relationships and personal vulnerabilities. This wasn't impulsive criminal behavior. It was a carefully planned and executed business model. Among Vanessa's files, investigators found what appeared to be a manual she had been developing for recruiting accomplices to help expand her operation. The manual included instructions for identifying potential victims, building false narratives about mental health concerns, and navigating various professional complaint systems to maximize damage while minimizing the risk of detection. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the psychiatrist who had provided false testimony in my guardianship case, was revealed to be not just a one-time accomplice, but a key partner in Vanessa's criminal enterprise. Phone records and financial documents showed that she had been providing fraudulent psychiatric evaluations for multiple victims over a 3-year period, earning over $180,000 from Vanessa's operation. The partnership between Vanessa and Dr. Walsh represented a particularly troubling corruption of the mental health system. Dr. Walsh's legitimate medical credentials provided credibility to Vanessa's fabricated narratives, while Vanessa's skills in manipulation and character assassination provided Dr. Walsh with a steady stream of income from fraudulent consultations.
The collaboration between Rodriguez and Walsh essentially weaponized the mental health profession against their victims, explained Dr. Robert Chen, a forensic psychiatrist who served as an expert witness in the federal case. They created a system that could destroy someone's career and reputation using the very institutions that are supposed to protect vulnerable individuals. The federal trial lasted 6 months and attracted national media attention as other victims came forward with similar stories. The case became a landmark example of how professional reputation could be targeted and destroyed through systematic manipulation of healthcare and legal systems. During the trial, forensic psychologists testified about Vanessa's psychological profile, describing her as someone with narcissistic personality disorder combined with antisocial traits that enabled her to exploit others without experiencing normal empathy or remorse. Dr. Lisa Chen, who had been providing therapy for me throughout this process, served as an expert witness on the psychological impact of long-term manipulation and gaslighting on victims. The victims of this type of systematic reputation destruction often suffer from complex trauma that can take years to fully resolve, Dr. Chen testified. They lose not just financial resources or professional standing, but their fundamental trust in their own perceptions and judgment. The psychological damage can be more devastating and longer lasting than the financial and career consequences. The testimony phase of the trial was particularly difficult for me and the other victims. We were required to provide detailed accounts of how Vanessa's manipulation had affected our lives, our careers, and our relationships. For many of us, it was the first time we had shared the full extent of the psychological damage we had experienced. Dr. Maria Gonzalez testified about how Vanessa's campaign had led to a year-long suspension from surgical privileges while she underwent unnecessary psychiatric evaluations and substance abuse treatment. I began to doubt everything about myself, she said. My surgical skills, my judgment, my relationships with colleagues. She had poisoned everything I had worked my entire career to build. The Sacramento dentist, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, described how the stress of defending against fabricated accusations had led to actual health problems, including anxiety disorders and insomnia that required medical treatment. The irony, she testified, is that her lies about my mental health eventually created real mental health struggles that I'm still working to overcome. Jake was called as a witness to testify about the impact on family members and spouses of victims. His testimony was particularly powerful because he had documented many of Vanessa's manipulative behaviors in real time, keeping detailed notes and recordings that helped establish the timeline and methods of her psychological manipulation. What she did to Rebecca wasn't just criminal fraud. It was psychological torture, designed to destroy her sense of reality and self-worth. I watched someone I love question her own sanity because of the lies and manipulation of someone she trusted as family. The defense team's strategy focused on attempting to portray Vanessa as someone who suffered from mental illness herself and should be considered more of a victim than a perpetrator. They brought in their own psychiatric experts who testified about personality disorders and claimed that Vanessa's behavior was driven by psychological compulsions rather than criminal intent. However, the prosecution's evidence of the systematic and business-like nature of her operation undermined any claims that her behavior was the result of mental illness. The detailed planning, financial record-keeping, and recruitment of accomplices demonstrated clear criminal intent and sophisticated understanding of the consequences of her actions. Federal prosecutor David Martinez delivered closing arguments that tied together 2 years of investigation and testimony. The defendant didn't commit these crimes because of mental illness or family dysfunction, he argued. She committed them because they were profitable and because she believed she was smart enough to avoid consequences. She targeted successful women in healthcare professions because she understood that concerns about mental health would be taken seriously in those fields, and because the victims' demanding careers would make it difficult for them to defend themselves effectively. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning guilty verdicts on all federal charges. Vanessa was convicted on 47 counts, including racketeering, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. The conviction carried a potential sentence of up to 150 years in federal prison. During the sentencing phase, each victim was given the opportunity to provide impact statements describing how Vanessa's crimes had affected their lives. I chose to address the court in person, wanting to look Vanessa in the eye as I described the damage she had caused. Your Honor, the defendant didn't just steal money or damage professional reputations, I said, looking directly at Vanessa as she sat at the defendant's table. She stole years of our lives, our ability to trust our own judgment, and our faith in the institutions that are supposed to protect professionals from false accusations. She turned our own success against us, using our achievements as weapons to destroy everything we had worked to build.
I continued, but perhaps most importantly, she betrayed the sacred trust of family relationships, using intimate knowledge gained through years of closeness to inflict maximum psychological damage. She didn't just commit crimes, she perverted the very concept of family loyalty and sibling love. Vanessa showed no visible emotion during any of the victim impact statements, maintaining the same detached expression she had worn throughout the trial. When given the opportunity to address the court before sentencing, she declined to make a statement. Judge Catherine Morrison, no relation to the attorney, sentenced Vanessa to 45 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for 30 years. In her sentencing remarks, Judge Morrison noted the unprecedented nature of the crimes and their impact on multiple victims across several states. The defendant created and operated a criminal enterprise that specifically targeted successful professional women, using fabricated mental health narratives to destroy careers and steal financial resources, Judge Morrison said. The sophistication and cruelty of these crimes, combined with the defendant's complete lack of remorse, require a sentence that protects society from further predation while sending a clear message that this type of systematic reputation destruction will not be tolerated. Dr. Walsh received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison and permanent revocation of her medical license. Craig, who had cooperated with federal investigators and provided extensive testimony about the operation, received a reduced sentence of 8 years in federal prison. The aftermath of the federal conviction brought a sense of justice that had been missing from the original state-level prosecutions. While my personal case had been resolved through the guardianship dismissal and the initial criminal charges, seeing the full scope of Vanessa's crimes exposed and prosecuted provided a deeper understanding of what I had survived. More importantly, the federal investigation and trial led to significant reforms in how professional licensing boards and healthcare institutions handle allegations involving mental health concerns. The case became a model for recognizing and investigating potential reputation assassination campaigns, protecting other professionals from similar attacks. 3 years after the federal sentencing, I can say with certainty that the experience, while traumatic, ultimately strengthened my character and clarified my values in ways that no other life experience could have accomplished. I learned to trust my instincts about people's motivations, to set firm boundaries even with family members, and to recognize that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. My veterinary practice has not only recovered, but expanded into emergency and critical care services that help other animal hospitals in the Portland area. The skills I developed in crisis management and systematic problem-solving during the legal battles have proven invaluable in managing complex medical cases and running a successful business. Jake and I married 2 years ago in a small ceremony attended by the people who had supported us through the darkest period of our lives. Our relationship, tested by extraordinary circumstances, emerged stronger and more authentic than many couples ever experience. Most importantly, I've found my voice as an advocate for other professionals who face character assassination attempts and fraudulent accusations. I speak regularly at medical conferences and professional development seminars, helping colleagues understand the warning signs of reputation attacks and providing strategies for protecting themselves from similar schemes. The woman who tried to destroy my life now sits in federal prison, facing the consequences of choices that harmed dozens of innocent people. Meanwhile, I continue building a life based on truth, authentic relationships, and the hard-won wisdom that comes from surviving someone's attempt to rewrite your reality. Sometimes the most important lesson isn't about forgiveness or family loyalty, it's about recognizing when someone has forfeited their right to be in your life and having the courage to protect yourself and others accordingly.
Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.